Hello, this is Real History with Melissa, and it is January the 1st, 2025. No, I'm kidding. I knew it was the 26th, and Nick and I were just talking about it. So it is 2026 is here. And remember the olden days when people wrote checks? And then you'd have to remember to put on the check that you'd be the first couple of checks that you wrote, you'd have the old year on there. I don't think anybody writes checks anymore, so we don't have to worry about those things. But anyway, it is 2026. Hello, Scarf Man.
Hello. Good to be back.
Yeah,
I'm
I
glad
love that.
we're
I love the scarf. I haven't seen that one. That's a beauty.
this is the second one that I got. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's beautiful. It's lovely
yeah.
autumn kind of shades and it matches really well. We've kind of got an inverted thing going on. I got a green top and an orangey scarf, and you've got an orangey top with a green scarf. And
That's it.
again, it
Yeah.
wasn't planned, but
No, no. Well, since like last week when we were going to record, it was a cold day and I had a scarf day. And then it went into warm, like summertime weather. And
wow.
yeah, on Christmas Day, it was t-shirt weather, super warm. And then yesterday, we went out to one of my brother's house for a little bit more Christmas. And it was, let's see. It was in the 80s, which is about 28, 29 degrees.
Ooh, nice.
Uh-huh. And then on the drive home, it was just dropping, dropping, dropping. He lives about half an hour away, so it was dropping. And between last night and this morning, it dropped for more than 40 degrees. So I was out this morning
Hmm.
bagging up my herbs. So that's it. All my herbs are, because tonight it's going to get down well below freezing. So
Wow.
it's
So
cold.
strange.
Yeah.
So it's good to have scarves.
Yes, it is. Very good. Are we ready to dive in and do it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Hello to everybody in 2026. We made it through another year. And yeah, it is 2026, not 2025. You haven't become a time traveler yet, have you not? Like Alan and
Yes. Yes. Well,
the
you
other,
know
who was the
what?
other person? Was it who was it?
C.S. Lewis,
C.S. Lewis is a
she
time
said
traveler.
C.S. Lewis is a time traveler. So, but here's the thing, Nick. If I had become a time traveler, I would not go back to the beginning of 2025.
No.
I'd choose
Yes.
a different time.
Unless you
So,
were just sort of testing it out, just do a short trip at first, make sure it works. And,
oh, I
there's
see.
what's that? Did
Yeah.
you ever see that time traveler film called Looper?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the most confusing film I think that's ever been made.
Yes.
So that's what it's like, isn't it? You do a half hour and then you think, oh, this thing works, and then you try and you go a bit further and you,
Yeah.
you sort of increase it from there.
Yeah. We had a friend, Alan had a friend named Brian, and Brian is a character, a real character. And he would try different experiments, and then he would tell Alan about it. And one of it, he'd been reading up on how to make your own time traveling machine, more or less. He said that he was going to start. Now, he never did it, but he said, I'm going to start by trying to send a cup or something back in time. And then he said, no, maybe I should do it with an animal, a cat. I'll send a cat back in time. So, but no, he was serious.
Wow,
Alan asked
fantastic.
him, "Did you ever send that cat back?" And he said, "No, no, I'm into something else. I got some other thing cooking." So,
Yeah, I've got something more interesting than time travel.
yeah, exactly. Did you
Fantastic.
make New Year's resolutions?
Well, no, no, I didn't. Not yet. Not yet. But I've definitely got to. I've been thinking a little bit about it this upcoming year, this last year, the big changes that have taken place, and I think I'm going to have to do make some alterations to my routines and my time management and my productivity, and be very um, careful about what I commit myself to doing and making sure I'm getting putting my effort where it's most effective, and thinking about these kinds of things, because having rapidly growing human being to look after changes everything very drastically. And he's got to that point now where he's crawling and he's rolling around and he's falling off things, and you can't really turn your back on him for any number of seconds. One, because he screams at you, like, give me attention, look at me, I'm over here. And two, because he might just flop out of whatever thing he's sitting on or in at the time. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a different, new. I'm gonna have to change the pace of things, I think, and
Mhm.
be kind of be a bit little more strict with how I allot time and what I'm focusing on, and not be as spontaneous as I have been in the past. Because we've talked about it before. My process has always been just work on whatever I feel like doing in the moment, and somehow that allowed me to get things done. But I think I need a little more of a structure in place. So that's going to be my kind of area of consideration in the upcoming year. What about you?
Well, it's almost, I don't even have to say anything because you pretty much covered everything that I've been thinking about. It's true. It's true. I mean, this time of the year, I've been doing a lot of reflecting and more so, just kind of on Alan and the things that I want to do around his work. And I realized I'm coming up on Alan not being here for 5 years. This is
Wow.
coming up, and I'm not one to stop and go, oh, good job, you got that. I just barrel on to the next thing. And I know that I have accomplished some things, but when I look at it that way, what did you do in 5 years as opposed to what do you think needs to be done? And there's just so much more with his work that I specifically with his work, but in, life in general. And so I've said, a good talking to, you've got to be more careful with your time and what you commit to and how you approach things. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm just in the process of the good talking to, where I say, time really flies and you've got a lot to do. So,
It does fly. It really does. So we'll have to make our we'll give that some consideration and then compare notes and see what we come up with, because
all right.
yes, it's a good thing to think about heading into the new year.
Okay, now before we head into that hideous strength, with our resolutions and our time management, are we going to cover a scanner darkly? And
Yes.
okay, so we're going to do that. Here's what I was thinking about that. I would love it if the people who are following along here would read it. We're giving you ample warning to get it. I got my copy at the library. It was free.
Mm.
You could check it out. You can get a cheap copy, a used copy. It's completely available. It's just over 200 pages. So this is not a big time commitment. And it just is, I know it'll be a quick read because I've read a lot of Philip K. Dick and his novels fly by. So you should do that because I think it's more fun if we assume that you've all read it while we're talking. Then, in terms of our time management, we don't have to summarize the novel so carefully because you've already read it.
And we don't have to spend so many hours
Yes.
detailing. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up doing that, because when we first started, we were doing, I mean, we covered Snow Crash, not
Yeah.
Snowpiercer. That's a television show. Snow Crash, that's a huge book, but we did that in a 2.5 hours or something in one
Yeah.
video anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For this one, we seem to have really got enjoyed sort of taking our time, and it's been nice.
Well, it was three novels. The series is three novels, but more than that, the way that C.S. Lewis wrote, he just brought in so many different concepts and historical references and literary references. For me, it seemed like, oh, I've got to know what he's talking about here. I have to know what that means. And with a contemporary novel, uh, I just don't think we have that big of a hill to climb.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed.
So we're going to, and next we may end up just as a time saver for us doing See Jane, See Jane Run. We're just going to get simpler in our selections.
We'll have a rule, no sentence is longer than 5 words.
That's it.
It would be quite
All
a
right.
fun sort of tea party game, wouldn't it? After
Yes.
dinner game to play.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it reminds me of the game where you can only ask questions. Have you ever played that one? That's quite a fun one as well. Sort of you have to have a conversation, but you're only allowed to ask a question. And if you answer the question or you use a declarative sentence, then you're out basically. And the next, I think it's a whose
Ah,
line is it anyway type of game, but that's quite funny
yeah. Yeah.
and very
That's
very
not,
difficult.
yes, it does.
But we've got another kind of not a tea party, it's a banquet coming up to discuss, which
Okay.
is very good. But we're not quite there yet. So I messaged you
We,
before, and we've got a tiny bit of chapter 12 to polish off, I think.
yes,
And
we got into, I'm thinking it was around probably close to halfway through chapter 12, maybe not that far along into it, but we got to the macrobes because I wanted to. So, chapter 12, because I'm the one with the titles, was Wet and Windy Night. And so, where Frost has now told Mark that something else speaks through Alcason's head. And that's something else. So we all of this time we thought that they had revived the head of a man who Alcazan who killed his wife, and they, attached it to some tubes and fed it liquids, and they were keeping this criminal alive. But no, it's just a head that the macrobes use. So then we had a little bit of discussion about the demonic and all of that. And that's where we are. If
yes, the last part was Mark feeling he'd finally got into the true inner circle, the
yeah.
thing he's been doing his whole life, he's been craving, he's been looking for, he's been throwing friendships and relationships to the side to try and impress and get in to that most precious place. And here is the final one. Although he's starting to have this feeling of something is not right here, because well, I suppose he's been kidnapped at this point, hasn't he, and chucked in a
Mhm.
cell. So that's going to send your alarm bells
There's
ringing.
that.
Yeah. So the last section for the only thing I wrote down to sort of mention here um, is Mark's alone. Frost leaves him, and he's alone in his cell. I've jumped ahead quite a bit. This is sort of the last section of the chapter.
Okay.
It's the last 3 pages of the chapter, and he realizes he's kind of reflecting on what's going on, and he's thinking about Jane, and he realizes that he's finally disgusted and really turned off by what's going on at the Nice, and he feels liberated because he's no longer trying to impress and get into this circle. He's kind of rejected it, and he's found himself on this on the it says he could talk of his side now.
Hmm.
Already he was with Jane and with all she symbolized. And so he's kind of come to the realization that he doesn't want to be part of this. He's on the side that opposes this. And then there's a quite a long section about about how he's thinking and reflecting on how he's going to die. And then he realizes that he's suffered a kind of attack. And that's the bit that I wrote down really is the sort of, let's see, second to last paragraph. It says gradually he realized that he had sustained some sort of attack and that he had put up no resistance at all. And this causes him to have a new dread because he thinks that, well, when I've decided to fight for the good, shouldn't the whole universe kind of align behind me and support me and make it happen? And he realizes it's not quite that simple. And that in fact his mind can be changed from external influence, even if he's resolved to do what is right. And
Hmm.
so that's quite a scary realization that he comes to there.
There was
And
just,
he end
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
just I was just going to say he ends the chapter kind of reflecting on this. that he says the cynics then were right. This is what you got for your pains. The very first moment you tried to be good, the universe let you down. But then he says, hang on, is this way of thinking also another attack? So he's kind of undergoing this psychological interference, which is reminiscent, isn't it? Is it at the beginning of Perelandra where Ransom's or where Lewis is going to meet Ransom's cottage and he sustains a kind of attack on his way there, doesn't he? And when he arrives and he wants to turn back and he's scared and the road takes on this sort of frightful appearance to him and he has to sort of push on through and gets all these nagging doubts and oh, I should go back to the train station and I should find my lost
Mhm.
luggage and I can't keep right. So it's a kind of echo and a repeat of that. But at least here we can see Mark. He's recognizing it happening and he's got some kind of defense and some sort of awareness in place.
There was just one thing that I wanted to back up like a page before we conclude this chapter and just mention this because I think it'll tie into something that happens a little bit later. But I want to echo what you're saying is that what we're seeing here with Mark is a process. Like Jane has a couple of epiphany kind of things where her world is unmade and, things kind of hit her like a lightning bolt. Whereas with Mark, it seems to me that he's having a series of internal discussions and you never know which way he's going because he'll look like he's headed over to the Jane's side and then he'll come back and even as he's starting to get his conscience legs, it feels like, well, he's just not having that he's not having that moment that is decisive that changes everything that converts him. It's just
Yeah.
not so neat with him. But there's a
Yeah, it's
place
a
there.
back and forth,
Yeah.
a push and pull, and there's always that kind of risk and danger
Yeah.
that it will go either way, which kind of shows you, that is the nature of things like temptation and dealing with your own shortcomings and vices, or uh, maybe things you might want to change about yourself. It's not often that it happens where you just change overnight. It's usually a long-term thing where temptation comes back and old habits come back, and so making that kind of change and that kind of big commitment is not an instantaneous thing, is it?
No, no, it's not. But he is examining things. He is examining the things that he went after, like on his pursuit for the inner circle. He's asking himself, why? Why was he attracted to that? Why did he want that? And he he said he could not now think of Jane except in terms of appetite, and appetite here made no appeal. The serpent faced with the true dragon, became a fangless worm. But it was like lust in another respect also. It is idle to point out to the perverted man the horror of his perversion. While the fierce fit is on, that horror is the very spice of his craving. It is ugliness itself that becomes, in the end, the goal of his lechery. Beauty has long since grown too weak a stimulant. And I think this just gives us a little bit of foreshadowing of what's to come with some of the other characters a little bit later on. That Mark is in a place now of examining why did he like that? It was kind of disgusting. Why did he want that? But C.S. Lewis uses this as an opportunity to say, when you've got a perversion of a natural instinct, it is the ugliness of itself that is the turn on. And that's very, very interesting. I mean, I don't want to go too far afield here, but if you talk to people who have gotten into pornography, it's a descent to darker and darker types because what satisfied you initially no longer satisfies you. So we don't have to land on this and stay here too long, but it will factor in a little bit later.
Yeah,
So,
there's another part as well, like you were just saying earlier about how he's flip-flopping. He's going, he could go either way. Excuse me.
mhm,
In the second to the last paragraph, it also says, so he's made this moral resolution to reject the Bellbury crew, and then it says he knew to be sure that he might change his mind. So even he's saying there that he knew that he still might change his mind
yeah,
himself. Um, but it had never occurred to him that his mind could be changed for him, all in
yes.
an instant of time, changed beyond recognition. If that sort of thing could happen, it was unfair. So yeah, he's in the cell and he's struggling with this, and he says as well that he's under the macrobes are in there with him, and he knows that, and he says that they are. He did not doubt that they were present with him in the cell, breathed death on the human race and on all joy. So it's yeah, it's a real dark night of the soul for Mark,
Yes, good.
and
All
it gets
right.
much weirder from that point on.
Yes, it does. So we move on to chapter 13, and I've got the titles. So the title of this is They Have Pulled Down Deep Heaven on Their Heads.
And that's a quote from Merlin or Ransom. I forget which one said that now, actually.
Um,
Um, but the main part for this chapter for me, I didn't make a lot of highlights and notes, but this is really where we meet Merlin properly.
mhm,
They've been out to his burial site, and there was a it was a dark night and it was windy and wet. I think that was the previous chapter, wasn't it?
mhm,
And Jane and Mr. Dimble and someone else, I think, went out there and they couldn't find him because he steals a horse or he finds a horse and then he
mhm,
rides right out to the manor house where Ransom and the the crew are all staying. And there's a knock on the door, and this chapter starts with Merlin sort of arriving, opening the door, and the first meeting of Ransom and Merlin. And having Merlin, his this character Merlin is there's actually quite a lot of comedy in these last few chapters. I found myself like chuckling at certain parts. There's some really good like humorous bits in here, and Merlin kind of brings a little bit of that
mhm.
uh, comic relief. But he's quite an interesting character.
Well,
Um,
and this chapter starts off with a little bit of Latin because Ransom is confronted with the stranger. We don't know it's Merlin, but he's confronted with the stranger who's just kind of like hanging out at the doorway, flopping out at the doorway. And so Ransom immediately goes into his attack mode and he tells this figure to stand where you are and tell me your name and business, and that his command is not complied with. And so he repeats it in Latin with a little bit more direction. And the Latin translated is stand in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. Tell me who you are and why you come. So Ransom, is calling down some powers and confronting the stranger.
and the stranger responds, "Tell the lord of this house that I am come," because he takes Ransom, and I think McPhee's there as well, to be servants or workers in the house.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think he puts McPhee to sleep at some point as well, which I thought was
Yes.
quite quite comedic. Because earlier in the book, Ransom's telling McPhee that he can't go to meet Merlin. McPhee saying, "I'm younger than Mr. Dimble. You should send me out there and keep Mr. Dimble here as an old man." And he says, "Oh, that would be like sending a child to fight a tank." And then we have Ransom's like point of view confirmed right here because Merlin just sends him to sleep and like very. just with a wave of his hand, basically, doesn't he?
And this is,
Um,
it's just a little reminder that McPhee is the doubting Scotsman. He's practical, rational, and he's in the group, but he's always applying his um, rational mind to everything. And the supernatural is just not in McPhee's world. No way. And that's why Ransom sends Dimble out because it's spiritual warfare. And he's going to, he will be a child in spiritual warfare. So yeah, there's some fun there.
so they go back and forth in some different languages, don't they?
Hmm.
Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and then Merlin asks some questions to test Ransom and to sort of find out who he is. And what does he say to him? He says, I'll ask you three questions.
Well, is the first one, let's see. I'm not
I
sure
didn't
if
mark
this
that
is
bit.
the first one or the last question, but he asks him, uh, Merlin says, "Tell me, slave," because he doesn't think that Ransom, "Tell me, slave, what is Numenor?"
Yeah, that's the first question. That's the first one.
Okay.
What is Numenor? And then the next question is, who is called Silva? What road does she walk? Why is the womb barren on one side? Where are the cold marriages? And then the last question, where is the ring of Arthur the King? What lord has such a treasure in his house? And the answer to that third question, which Ransom gives, is basically that that he is the lord who has the treasure in his house.
He is the Pendragon.
And then at this point, Merlin sort of he realizes he's in the right place, and he that he's actually talking to the lord of the house.
Hmm.
And then he sort of, and the rest of the chapter is kind of his recruitment, or him being brought up to speed on the situation, and the whole team kind of thinking about and trying to hatch a plan. There's a good bit as well where McPhee asks about his credentials,
Uh-huh.
demands to see his credentials. The bits that I highlighted in here are a little bit later on.
I highlighted just one thing earlier, and that was at the second question when he said, "Who is Solva?"
Oh yeah,
And Ransom said, "Solva is she whom mortals call the moon. She walks in the lowest sphere." And it's talking about how one half looks to deep heaven and all there is beautiful and, fertile. The other, so we're talking about the moon. The other side, is this the dark side? I don't know. The womb is barren and the marriage is cold. There dwell an accursed people full of pride and lust. There, when a young man takes a maiden in marriage, they do not lie together, but each lies with a cunningly fashioned image of the other. These devilish arts. And it goes on to describe the devilish arts. But really, when you read that whole scene, he's describing the VR headset out of Demolition Man.
right.
That's how they have sex in the future. They take the human and the messy and the physical out of it, and
Hmm.
that scene is that, which I thought was kind of funny. And
Okay.
they fabricate their children by vile arts in a secret place. Does that not
Like
sound like artificial insemination? Or no, not even that. That's still too physical. It's test tube babies.
I was going to say, it's Brave
Yeah.
New World.
Yep.
And it also links back to something that Mark was told by one of the members of Bellbury about there being creatures on the moon and how the moon was being taken over by the macrobes
Hmm.
and there was another race or another species up there that were being gradually wiped out as the macrobes extended their influence and then actually the bit that this linked to that I'd question later is Sulver. So this is the name for the moon, Sulver. And the bit that the next part I highlighted was when Merlin sees Jane, and he has a bit of a problem with Jane, and he demands. Let's see, what does he say? He says, "Sir, you have in your house the falsest lady of any at this time alive," and he demands that, or he suggests. I can't. Does he demand, suggest? I forget, but he says
He said it
basically
would
that
be a great charity.
yes, that it would be a great charity if they chopped her head off.
Yep.
And the bit that I put a question mark next to it because he says all right, let's go back a second. So he says Dimble heard the director answer in the same language. Sir, you are mistaken. She is doubtless like all of us a sinner, but the woman is chaste. Sir, said Merlin, know well that she has done in Logres a thing of which no less sorrow shall come than came of the stroke that Balinus struck. For, sir, it was the purpose of God that she and her lord should between them have begotten a child by whom the enemies should have been put out of Logres for 1,000 years. She's but lately married, said Ransom. The child may yet be born. Sir, said Merlin, be assured that the child will never be born, for the hour of its begetting is past. Of their own will they are barren. I did not know till now that the usages of silver were so common among you. For 100 generations in 2 lines the begetting of this child was prepared, and unless God should rip up the work of time, such seed and such an hour in such a land shall never be again.
Hmm.
And the bit I'd put a question mark, I'd forgotten that Sulva was the name of the moon.
Hmm.
And so they're kind of timing their nighttime or bedroom activities, I guess, based upon the cycles to minimize the chance of getting pregnant. I suppose that's
Yes.
what it means by the usages of Sulva.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
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 And so, yeah, so Merlin says, it would be a great charity if you gave order that her head should be cut from her shoulders, for it is a weariness to look at her.
Yes. So there, in a variety of ways, they're simply not consummating their marriage at the highest level. That's, she will not. I'm trying to think of a good word for it. The only one that comes to mind is surrender, but she will not surrender herself to love and to him. She will not give up her independence, and he will not sublimate lust, pure lust, to have a higher expression of I heard a good description of it, eros
Mm,
baptized. So you take desire, but it has a baptism of the highest congress that a man and a woman can have together, the highest function, which would include things like procreation, of course, and that's why he takes it back to the moon. They will not engage in what they're supposed to engage in, therefore they've denied the world, a potential savior because, someone who could grow and fight this, abomination. So, but Ransom is pointing out quite right. Um, they're not done yet. So, and
So
I don't have anything marked for quite a while.
no, me neither. The only thing I put in was Mr. Dimble's sort of explanation about Merlin and who he is, because they're having conversations about this person, and they're not sure about Merlin working with their group and with Ransom. They're a little bit suspicious and uncomfortable about having him there. And Mr. Dimble gives a good sort of long paragraph he's explaining to Mrs. Dimble, he said, Merlin is the reverse of Bellbury. He's at the opposite extreme. He's the last vestige of an old order in which matter and spirit were, from our modern point of view, confused. For him, every operation on nature is a kind of personal contact, like coaxing a child or stroking one's horse. After him came the modern man, to whom nature is something dead, a machine to be worked and taken to bits if it won't work the way he pleases. Finally come the Bellbury people, who take over that view from the modern man unaltered and simply want to increase their power by tacking onto it the aid of spirits, extra natural, anti natural spirits. Of course, they hope to have it both ways. They thought the old magia of Merlin, which worked in the spiritual qualities of nature, loving and reverencing them and knowing them from within, could be combined with the new Goetia, the brutal surgery from without. No. In a sense, Merlin represents what we've got to get back to in some different way. Do you know that he is forbidden by the rules of his order to use any edged tool on any growing thing? So I thought that was a pretty good section just to sort of explain that Merlin is this anachronistic figure from a time that is gone. I think 1,500 years old or something. He's been sort of suspended in sleep. And what we kind of find out as it goes through is that the Bellbury people, the scientists and the whole inner circle over there have massively underestimated um, the support they have and the effect and the power and the influence and also Merlin as well. They're kind of like vastly inept and underqualified to deal with the kind of things that they're messing with, and that's what kind of comes out later. And so for Merlin to be brought back, it's more natural that he comes straight over to seek out Ransom and the group, than go straight over to the Bellbury crew and start talking to them. Um,
And another thing too that this passage reminded me of, made me think of, is that those at the top are never content with science the way they present it to everyone down below them. Because what just made me think of years of listening to Alan talk about the deviant priesthood. Who are they? Who do they say they are? What are they messing with? So they present science on our level as it's pure reason, ration, it's scientific, it's the scientific method. But there's always been a dark arts. If you look at the history of chemistry, alchemy, there's always been something else there. And so what's going on with the nice is that they're actively looking to bring that force to bear. This isn't pure science. It was never about pure science for them. It was about trying to bring that other element into it and then harness the power.
mhm.
And but yeah, pagan Merlin is presented with his choice. He sees, it's not, and I like that about C.S. Lewis. It's not a dialectic between paganism and Christianity. It's showing a progression, if you will, and that's where Merlin gets to himself. He arrives at his own crossroads 1,500 years later. He's there. Oh, okay. I have a lot of power. Where am I going to put it in service?
And then another good section is where Merlin is talking to the director about his experience of their time and way of living. And I
Mhm.
thought this was pretty good as well. He talks about he says, I give you great thanks. I cannot understand the way you live. Your house is strange to me. You give me a bath such as the emperor himself might envy, but no one attends me to it. A bed softer than sleep itself, but when I rise from it, I find I must put on my own clothes with my own hands as if I were a peasant.
Mhm.
I lie in a room with windows of pure crystal so that you can see the sky as clearly when they are shut as when they are open, and there is not wind enough within the room to blow out an unguarded taper. but I lie in it alone, with no more honor than a prisoner in a dungeon. Your people eat dry and tasteless flesh, but it is off plates as smooth as ivory and as round as the sun. In all the house there are warmth and softness and silence that might put a man in mind of paradise terrestrial. But no hangings, no beautiful pavements, no musicians, no perfumes, no high seats, not a gleam of gold, not a hawk, not a hound. You seem to me to live neither like a rich man nor a poor one, neither like a lord nor a hermit. Sir, I tell you these things because you have asked me. They're of no importance. But yeah, I just thought it was a good to really remind us of the how out of place and out of time he is and where he's coming from. Um, and yeah, it was a good little passage because he is sort of confused at first. Why has he
Hmm.
been brought back and why is he here and who's he talking to? And he takes him a little while to adjust and wrap his head around it. But he has a very important role to play
Hmm.
in the
And
last
there's,
three chapters of the book.
yeah, I don't have anything else. I have one more thing for chapter 13, and that is when Merlin is trying to figure out what role he is to play, and he's basically telling Ransom or trying to demonstrate his powers and that he can call from these natural powers, the nature, and use that. And the director said, "No, that cannot be done any longer. The soul has gone out of the wood and water. Oh, I dare say you could awake them a little, but that would not be enough. A storm or even a river flood would be of little avail against our present enemy. Your weapon would break in your hands." And here he introduces that hideous strength. For the hideous strength confronts us, and it is as in the days when Nimrod built a tower to reach heaven, the Tower of Babel. So he doesn't say the Tower of Babel, but that's what he says for the hideous strength confronts us. And this is kind of the culmination of his discussion on modern man. The spirit, the magic, all of this has been removed for the average man and woman, but dark forces wish to awaken it for their own end. And he's letting Merlin know you're here and you're here for a reason, but everything that you think you're bringing to the party is no use. So,
Yeah. And he tells him what his use is in this before the end of this chapter as well, right? He says,
mhm,
uh, they talk about how, yeah, because Merlin's coming up with all these ideas and these things that he could do, and he's like, can we not go and find some help from a faraway place? And then he tells him that the Malacandra and Perilandra and the powers of heaven that they're going to need they basically need a vessel almost.
mhm,
And Merlin says, Sir, if they, meaning the sort of these gods of these planets and Malacandra and Paralandra, if they put forth their power, they will unmake all Middle Earth. And Ransom says, yes, that is why they will work only through a man. The magician drew one large hand across his forehead. Through a man whose mind is opened to be so invaded, said Ransom, one who by his own will once opened it. I take our fair lord to witness that if it were my task, I would not refuse it, but he will not suffer a mind that still has its virginity to be so violated. And through a black magician's mind, their purity neither can nor will operate. One who has dabbled in the days when dabbling had not begun to be evil or was only just beginning, and also a Christian man and a penitent. A tool, I must speak plainly, good enough to be so used and not too good. In all these western parts of the world, there was only one man who had lived in those days and could still be recalled. You. And and at this realization of what the plan is and what his purpose is and what he has to do, Merlin stands up and he just lets out a horrible scream. He loses control of himself, and it's a yell of primitive Celtic lamentation. It says, "It was horrifying to see that withered and bearded face, all blubbered with undisguised tears like a child." And then Ransom shouts at him, "Silence! Sit down! You put us both to shame." And Merlin, as suddenly as it had begun, the frenzy ended. So again, just another um, insight into how different this man is, the time, that it would have been probably of his time totally normal and natural to just let out this fearsome scream and then snap back into it rather than totally lose control. But I thought that bit was good as well. And then at the very end of the chapter, when Merlin's talking about, oh, can we get some support from various places, Ransom shakes his head and he explains how that the poison was brewed in these west lands, but it spat itself everywhere by now. However far you went, you would find the machines, the crowded cities, the empty thrones, the false writings, the barren beds, men maddened with false promises and soured with true miseries, worshipping the iron works of their own hands, cut off from earth, from their mother, and from the Father in heaven. You might go east so far that east became west, and you returned to Britain across the great ocean, but even so, you would not have come out anywhere into the light. And so, just reminding us that the nice is international in nature. It is all over the globe, and Mark also tells us this when he's fantasizing about leaving the country to flee and run away and go to
Mhm.
America. And he says, "Oh, he knows that there'll be somebody waiting for him on the ferry to America." So um, that's kind of how the chapter ends. And as you said as well, with Ransom saying the hideous strength holds all this earth in its fist to squeeze as it wishes. Oh, and then he talks about as well their one mistake, which is allowed them to be which allows them to be defeated. He says, their one mistake, but for their one mistake, there would be no hope left. If of their own evil will they had not broken the frontier and let in the celestial powers, this would be their moment of victory. Their own strength has betrayed them. They have gone to the gods who would not have come to them and pulled down deep heaven on their heads. Therefore, they will die. And that's the title of the chapter, isn't it? It was Ransom who said it. So
Mhm.
it's this hubris, this arrogance, this overreaching, this wanting to go further, wanting more, not being content with what they have, not being humble enough to appreciate what they have. Or it's that sort of striving for more power, more wealth, more influence, more control, whatever it might be, that unmakes them in the end.
Mhm.
And then we're into chapter 14.
Real
This is where
life is meeting.
meeting.
Meeting. Real life is meeting is the
Okay.
title of that. And quite frankly, I don't understand it.
No,
So,
I was trying to work it out.
yeah, I mean, I read it, I reread parts of it. In fact, the solo that I did last week, covering Huxley and all of this, came from chapter 14. So I've really been into it. And, to sum up for me what the themes of this chapter are, it is about Frost and Wither trying to take Mark into a place of pure objectivity and to bring him to the point of what they call the initiation into objectivity. And so you have the discussion about how things are evolving. But of course, it's a group of people like Frost and Wither who've been chosen by the macrobes to help evolution. And so, the little folk are left to think, oh, well, we're just evolving because that it's an evolution without having any clue that those at the top know that you are not evolving. You are being helped along by a select group of initiates who have the help of something otherworldly that we know of as microbes. So that's really kind of what this chapter is about. But where that title comes from, I don't know. I don't get it. So,
Nope, I have no idea.
yeah.
But yes, this chapter, that's it. It marks objectivity training, and there's various steps and stages to this training, and one of them involves him being left in what's called the objective room. What did you think about the objective room?
Well, it was kind of scary. I mean, it was for him too. He doubted his sanity a lot, and he was left to stare at things, marks on the wall, and is that there intentionally? Are they messing with my head? I mean, it was high level torture chamber.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It's you get the sensation of a kind of like a funhouse type of room where
Mhm.
everything is just slightly off kilter, not quite symmetrical, not quite flat. There's no 90-degree angles, but they're only out by 1 or 2 degrees so that you're looking at things and you're thinking, is that straight? Is that not quite? And then you can't, and then you get obsessed with staring at it, trying to work it out. And then you get why, and then you have to go and look at it and you can just imagine how this room has been designed, probably scientifically, to drive people nuts. And it would be sort of the opposite of using what's it called, like the golden ratio that is so attractive and makes things beautiful. It's kind of like a misuse of that sort of knowledge. And I feel like this is what is being done to us in our cities. When you look at some of the monstrous buildings that get put up, and they're always off kilter and angular and strange. They're never beautiful. They're never symmetrical. They always seem to be jarring. And I
Uh-huh.
think this modern architecture is a sort of macro form of what's described in this objective room, being done to all city dwellers just to put you a little bit off kilter and make you a little bit uneasy as you're going about your business in the beehive. So a little bit of that about that is the room at first sight was an anticlimax, and it's sort of a boring, cold, grey room with tables and chairs and nothing really worth uh, commenting on until he starts noticing things like the point of the arch was not in the center, the arch above the doorway, and the room was ill proportioned, not grotesquely so, but sufficiently to produce dislike. It was too high and too narrow. Uh, and then he noticed the spots on the ceiling. They were not mere specks of dirt or discoloration, they were deliberately painted on. These were black spots, placed at irregular intervals on the pale mustard colored surface. There were not a great many of them, perhaps 30. Or was it 100? He determined that they could not fall into the trap of trying to count them. They would be hard to count. They were irregularly placed. Or weren't they? Now that his eyes were growing used to them, their arrangement seemed to hover on the verge of regularity. They suggested some kind of pattern. Their peculiar ugliness consisted in the very fact that they kept on suggesting it and then frustrating the expectation thus aroused. Suddenly, he realized that this was another trap. I'll give an example. I was staying with family over Christmas, and in one of the bathrooms, there was tile. The floor was tiled, and the particular design of these tiles was kind of like pebbles, and they were sort of pebbles and not like totally like pebbles embedded in a bit of, I don't know what might be. It looked sort of like pebbles embedded in concrete, and each tile did have the same design, but they hadn't been placed so that each tile was the same way around. If that makes sense.
Oh, yes,
So I'm looking at
yes.
it and I'm like, those two are the same way around, but the one next to it is like 90 degrees away. And I was thinking, and so I get what he's talking about here. Sometimes you could be in a waiting room, you notice something, a pattern or a piece of carpet or something that's just not quite lined up, and so yeah, this is quite a great idea, I think, to him for C.S. Lewis to come up with this method of torture.
Yeah, that's very funny.
And then the sort of culmination of his description of this bit was Every fold of drapery, every piece of architecture had a meaning one could not grasp, but which withered the mind. Compared with these other surrealistic pictures were mere foolery. Long ago, Mark had read somewhere of things of that extreme evil which seem innocent to the uninitiate, and had wondered what sort of things they might be. Now he felt he knew. And it is that what's it kind of does make you think of evil is often portrayed as being very dramatic, gruesome, and fangs and horns and monsters, and but the idea that it's incredibly sort of mundane like this is
Hmm.
a different sort of dimension to it, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 Then you go into a little deeper into the objectivity preparation. He quit looking at that. He didn't want to become obsessed with the irregularity, and he's already started to figure out that there is an intention behind it. So he doesn't want to let it get to him. He said he understood the whole business now. Frost was not trying to make him insane, at least not in the sense Mark had hitherto given to the word insanity. Frost had meant what he said. To sit in the room was the first step towards what Frost called objectivity, the process whereby all specifically human reactions were killed in
Mm.
a man so that he might become fit for the fastidious society of the macrobes. So this was calculated. He said higher degrees of asceticism, of anti nature would doubtless follow. The eating of abominable food, the dabbling in dirt and blood, the ritual performances of calculated obscenities. They were, in a sense, playing quite fair with him, offering him the very same, excuse me, the very same initiation through which they themselves had passed and which had divided them from humanity. So he now sees that Wither has been turned into a shapeless ruin, and Frost, a hard, bright little needle that he now was.
It's a great description, isn't it? The hard,
Mhm.
bright little needle. And then yeah, and so he realizes this, and that was a good touch actually. This higher degrees, and I'm sure using the word degrees was very deliberate there as well. Um, and what happens is Mark becomes acutely aware of the opposite of what this objectivity training is supposed to be instilling in him. And it says the room had the effect of making him aware, as he had never been aware before, of this room's opposite. He was choosing a side, the normal. And so again,
Yeah,
it kind of it serves to reinforce this decision that he has to be on the side of good, to be on the side
yeah.
of Jane and the Dimbles and everything. So um, it's not quite having the effect,
No.
and
In
he can
fact,
see through it.
he said that he knew, he was aware that
Yeah.
he was having his first deeply moral experience just to choose normal. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, deeply moral experience. That's it.
Yeah. It was right above, he was choosing a side, the normal. Right above that, it said he was not thinking in moral terms at all, but he was having his first
Mm.
deeply moral experience. He was choosing a side, the normal. I just want all the walls to be properly aligned and no weird painted on spots. And
And then so the end of this part, he sort of realizes he's probably not going to make it out alive, but he's fine with that. He's kind of because he knows the alternative is to be a dehumanized servant of the macrobes. And then he meets the stranger, or he's been oh no, he's been spending time with the stranger, right? Another stranger. I don't think we mentioned that yet, have we? So
no,
part of Mark's
it's a tramp.
tramp,
They brought
yeah,
a tramp into jail with him.
But they don't know that, I don't think, at this point. They still think it's
Yes,
they think it's Merlin, don't
they
they?
do. They think
And
it's
this
the faux Merlin or whatever they call him, the
the
counterfeit. But
decoy.
they think they think they've got the real deal there, and the guy is a tramp who just kind of babbles nonsense.
Yeah,
But
and Mark's
they,
trying to
yeah,
talk to him and make a plan with him, and he just keeps saying, "Oh, foreigners, eh?" like like the people who are holding them captive are just foreigners.
uh-huh.
And that's where the comedy comes in, where Mark's kind of talking to this tramp and trying to get through to him, and I feel like as well that Merlin encountered this tramp, and when he came out of the place he was sleeping or resting, or his grave site or whatever it was, um, I feel like Merlin encountered the tramp and has maybe hypnotized him or put a spell on him or something like that, or
I think so. I think so.
yeah,
Yeah.
and taken his clothes and stolen his horse or something to get away. And then the Belbury people have captured him and they think it's Merlin and they're going, and this tramp is just he's not responding to them. There's a great description of how he just sort of sits there with a blank expression on his face, but every now and again giving a very sharp a sharp look, but never responding to anything they say. And so they're trying out all these different languages and treating him with reverence and respect. And then when they're not in the room, he and Mark are kind of like, oh, these bloody foreigners. and he kind of decides that Mark's trustworthy and keeps asking him for tobacco and this sort of thing.
There's a funny line there too, where Mark is communicating in a weird way because you can't really say they're having a conversation.
No.
But there is some kind of bonding, something is happening. Communication is happening, not a conversation, but communication happens between Mark and the tramp. And he finally realizes that he had become a member of a circle, as secret and strongly fenced against outsiders as any he had ever dreamed of. So he's always wanted to belong to the inner circle. He's always wanted to be in the know. And finally, with the tramp, he's in the inner circle. He and the tramp communicate. It's them against Frost and Wither, and they've got their own little way of communicating, and nobody else understands it. It's humorous.
Yeah. And the other thing to mention as well in this chapter is that Jane has a vision,
Mm-hmm.
and she's also reflecting on Mark, and
Mm-hmm.
she's having her own kind of transformation in the way she views things, and she's thinking about going back to Mark if he ever is rescued from Belbury, and it doesn't horrify her, but it's flat and insipid. And but she does feel like she will go back to him if he survives, and she has
Mm-hmm.
a new humility, and that it's a good resolution, although she would prefer it if it was somebody a bit more exciting than Mark. Um, and then she kind of thinks about him. She hadn't considered the possibility of his death, and then she's thinking about him, how he would look dead and in the bed, and how cold, and it makes her feel cold. And then she kind of drifts off into this vision. It's quite subtly done. You don't realize she's having a vision until very strange, weird things start happening. But we get that little insight as well into her the changes in her and how she's starting to come around to accept her kind of commitment that she's made to Mark, and her you might say obligation, or the importance of honoring that commitment if he survives and if he comes through, which is interesting because Mark's having it might be a little later when he's having this train of thought, but he's thinking about Jane at one point, and he's thinking when he does get to see her, he's going to set her free and basically say, you know, I married you for the wrong reasons, and I realize that now, and you are free to go. And so it's quite interesting they're having these two very different lines of thinking, but certainly more mature, more grown up, more adult than any earlier points in the book where where Jane's just wrestling with, oh, I should be my own individual and I should be able to have my academic career and I shouldn't have to submit to the will of anybody with more authority or higher than me, and certainly not a man. Ugh, you know,
Hmm.
this kind of feminist sort of way of looking at things. And then Mark's, of course, his earlier in the book, he's talking about how he reflects on, oh, he just married her because she's good looking and she would make a very nice hostess for the important people who he's going to be mixing with in the future when his career is up and running and he's made it and he's joined the circle, right? So yeah, that's another thing that comes up.
There's something in the that what we don't know yet is a dream, and it's kind of horrible. She is confronted with a female figure, and it's painterly in that it's not ugly. It's maybe a perfected female figure. There's these little dwarves, I think is the word he used, but there's dwarves all around this kind of statuesque female. But for Jane, it's a bit of a nightmare. And it leads to a conversation, and I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on it, but it leads to several pages where the director is talking with Jane about male female. And in a way, he's saying the masculine is he doesn't say God is masculine exactly, but he does say that before he's describing what it is to be male that Jane doesn't want to submit to, what it is to be feminine, but not what she saw in her dream because it's horrible and she doesn't understand why. So he explains to her, and I actually heard somebody lecturing on this. I don't know if I can find it again, but he used the word baptized eros. That's yeah, and I thought that was great. It's where you take all of that and put it to a better use. You don't sublimate it because she has that conversation with him about Freud. Is this repression? Am I having repression? And, so they bring Freud into the conversation. And he's explaining, no, that's not it exactly. It's transmuted, it's transformed. And what you saw in your dream, it's like it's the goddess run amok. It's just the power that the goddess has to awaken lust. It's just that that hasn't been tempered by the influence of the male. It's just this pure female power of generating lust, generating the generative without the object for it. And so this for her too, though it's a deep part of the conversation because remember she's a John Donne scholar, courtly love, romance, even sexuality, but and so she thinks she knows it all. She thinks I know about love, I know about the sex, I know it all, and look, I've been studying it in literature, but she has not yet um, relaxed into it. That's it. And that's what the director is telling her that is not only the highest form of love, but the natural form of love. And there's one other thing too at the culmination. I thought that this was good. The culmination of this whole conversation she has with the director. This is almost at the very end of chapter 14, the last page. It occurs to her that the director and the Dimbles and Camilla Arthur, they never talk about religion. She said, the director never talked about religion, nor did the Dimbles, nor Camilla. They talked about God. And that is a real revelation for her. Everything that she has associated with who she thinks these people are is actually not even real. They never talk about it. They never talk about, you should do it this way. This is what it should look like. You should burn some incense now. This is the part where everybody sings. There's none of that. It's just God. So,
Yeah, that final section, 2 pages, isn't it, before the chapter ends? There's a bit I actually highlight the whole lot because because it's all sort of relevant and it's well written. But I underlined the bit you just mentioned, how they don't talk about religion, they talk about God. But then on the next page as well, it's C.S. Lewis describes the demand on her, right, of aligning yourself with God's will, I suppose is a way to put it. And it says, this demand which now pressed upon her was not even by analogy like any other demand. It was the origin of all right demands and contained them. In its light, you could understand them, but from them you could know nothing of it. There was nothing and never had been anything like this, and now there was nothing except this. Yet also everything had been like this. Only by being like this had anything existed. In this height and depth and breadth, the little idea of herself which she had hitherto called me dropped down and vanished, unfluttering into bottomless distance, like a bird in a space without air. The name me was the name of a being whose existence she had never suspected, a being that did not yet fully exist, but which was demanded. And I thought, yeah, I
mhm,
thought that was good. It's that sort of aligning yourself to a higher purpose, um, to a plan that is outside and above and beyond you and your little ego and your little aspirations and whatever goals you may have in
mhm,
life. It's good to have those, but that pursuing those personal goals for me and my life, that's really a very like tiny, tiny thing compared to connecting with and aligning yourself to um, God, Spirit, Creator,
mhm.
whatever people prefer to call uh, that. Um,
And she tries once again, to be rational about it. And that chapter closes with, but her defenses had been captured, and these counterattacks were unsuccessful. Her trying to counter reality of what was happening with her, yes, but, and that was all for naught. Now speaking of the what you just said there about God, a connection to spirit, however you want to say it, the chapter 15 is entitled The Descent of the Gods. And
okay.
you'll see, I have no tabs marked here. I've got nothing
Hmm.
at all on this chapter, The Descent of the Gods. All I had to say was Merlin was no longer his own man. Merlin is being severed. I think C.S. Lewis uses that word there. He's being severed from this stasis that he's been in for 1,500 years. He is now going to be giving himself over to something else. And we get a clue there, the descent of the gods, but he's no longer his own man. And I have nothing else to say about this chapter. So if you do, go
Yes,
ahead.
I do. So this is interesting. It's quite a strange chapter. In fact, the sort of um, what I wrote down about this chapter is it's the arrival of five gods, and I wanted to ask, in the title for the chapter, does he use little g for gods? I am assuming he's doing little g gods, is he, or is he doing big G gods?
I
Because it's
don't
a
think so. I think it's
chapter title.
yeah, chapter it's the descent of the gods.
Well, it's big G gods, but that's a
Yeah.
title. So
But that's
yeah,
the
I
title,
don't know if
so
yeah.
yeah. And they are, I mean, you're right, they're little g. They are gods as with a little g, but
So it's quite interesting because the household. Ransom and the crew, they know that these gods are going to be coming down on this night, and the Dimbles, the and I've forgotten his name. I've just blanked on the Scottish man's name.
McPhee.
Yes, thank you, McPhee, and everybody. They're all in the kitchen, and the chapter's written in a way where the gods come down one by one, and their arrival has an effect on Ransom and Merlin, who are waiting to receive them in the blue room, and the whole rest of the group are in the kitchen, and each god has a different effect, and that's quite interesting because it just because of the legends and these being gods of planets and other things as well. There's quite a entertaining to read about how the group kind of become sometimes they're infused with song and dance, and they just get up and start dancing, and then they sit down and they can't remember why they were dancing or what the dance was, and then suddenly they're laughing and they're all telling stories and it's all humorous, and they sit down again and they can't remember what they were talking about. But it's very well done and entertaining. But the five gods that come down are uh we know Perilandra and Malacandra, that's
Hmm.
Venus and Mars. We've been to those places in the first two books, and of course that's men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and we met them at the end of Perilandra as well, where they both appear to honor the new king and queen of that country of that planet. But the first to arrive in this scene in this chapter is Viritrilbia, who is Mercury, also known as Thoth. That's what C.S. Lewis tells us. Then we also get Lurga, who is Saturn, and then we get Glund or Yarsa, who is Jove, who is
By
Jupiter.
Jove.
Yes, and I was like, Jove, who's Jove? I actually had to look Jove up to find out it was Jupiter. So we've got Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. They're all coming down. Their purpose is to meet Merlin and to kind of infuse powers into him that he's going to need to help Ransom and the crew fight back against the Nice, and to carry out the plan, which we see kind of unfold over the final two chapters. For this chapter, there's also in this chapter, however, we do have some scenes which take place in the Nice, um, where the director, the sort of Wither and Frost, they are they're in the process of trying to wake up the fake Merlin, and Wither is reminded that the fake director, the false director, the figurehead director, who we suspect might be based on H.G. Wells, is coming to to Belbury for a banquet that night, and this is kind of stressful for them because they're trying to focus on communicating with who they think is Merlin, but then they also have to take into account the arrival of Jules. He's called Jules, isn't he?
Hmm.
Um, and so I put down page 667. Uh, was just a note here that C.S. Lewis tells us that um, with a remembering, he had indeed forgotten that the puppet director, the dupe of the institute by whom it duped the public, was coming that night. And so I think this might be the first time that the Jules, the puppet, uh, is named as the director, because
Hmm.
we've said before we've said that Wither is the deputy director, and then on the other side we've got Ransom is the director of the good forces, and the director of the nice is just a figurehead. He's just a puppet.
Hmm.
But then we find out that he actually thinks he's the director, and
Hmm.
he doesn't. He's not in on the fact that he's just
Yes,
being
yeah,
used for his
yes,
name,
yes.
which is quite
Which
interesting.
lends credence all the more to the H.G. Wells comparison, frankly, for me, he's
Right.
clueless. He's just a tool.
Yeah, he's just a tool. And then there's also, however, something worth mentioning. The another sort of maybe the final stage, I suppose, in Mark's objectivity training, or a next stage in Mark's objectivity training, where he is taken back to the objective room, and This is page 669 in my section. It's about 4 pages from the end of the chapter. It says, meanwhile, in the objective room, something like a crisis had developed between Mark and Professor Frost. As soon as they arrived there, Mark saw that the table had been drawn back. On the floor lay a large crucifix,
Oh, I
almost
can't
life
believe I
size,
didn't mark this. Oh my
a work
goodness.
of art in the Spanish tradition, ghastly and realistic. We have half an hour to pursue our exercises, said Frost, looking at his watch. Then he instructed Mark to trample on it and insult it in other ways. So this is kind of the climax of Mark's training. It's the moment of truth for Mark in
Yes.
a way.
Yeah.
It's where he's instructed to do something, and it's quite an
Yeah.
interesting part, I thought. So what happens is he hesitates. He stands there and he
Mm-hmm.
looks at it and he's thinking
Mm-hmm.
about, and he talks to Frost about, why is he having to do this? And Frost says, if you had been brought up in a non-Christian society, you would not be asked to do this. Of course, it is a superstition, but it is that particular superstition which has pressed upon our society for a great many centuries. It can be experimentally shown that it still forms a dominant system in the subconscious of many individuals whose conscious thought appears to be wholly liberated. An explicit action in the reverse direction is therefore necessary towards complete objectivity. It is not a question for a discussion. We find it in practice that it cannot be dispensed with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, C.S. Lewis writes, with the introduction of this Christian symbol, the whole situation had somehow altered. Why was the crucifix there? Why were more than half the poison pictures religious? He had the sense of new parties to the conflict. This is Mark. Mark
Mm-hmm.
had the sense of new parties to the conflict, potential allies and enemies which he had not suspected before. If I take a step in any direction, he thought, I may step over a precipice. A donkey
Mm-hmm.
like determination to plant hoofs and stay still at all costs arose in his mind. Um, and then he's struck by the defenselessness of the figure
Mm-hmm.
of Christ on the cross, laid out on the ground. And that's quite a striking image as well, because I mean, every crucifix I've ever encountered has been affixed to a wall or stood upright. So
Mm-hmm.
just to have one on the ground, I mean, it's already a image of absolute suffering and torture and helplessness. But then to also be laid on the ground where you can trample over it, it really adds to that sort of defenselessness.
He's also, he's sure to say here again, he thinks Christianity is nonsense, but he's surprised at the emotions that come up for him, particularly around the helplessness of this figure on the ground.
And what was interesting about this bit as well is that he says, let's see, definitely. I made a note. I can't quite find the bit now, but he sort of says, "Well, I always thought it was nonsense, but the fact that this is here and they're making me do this
Mm-hmm.
lends credence to the idea that maybe maybe Christianity is real." But yeah, he identifies with the helplessness of the wooden Christ because he is helpless there in Belbury. Um, and he says, and that as he suddenly saw, that explained why this image, though not itself an image of the straight or normal, was in opposition to crooked Belbury. It was a picture of what happened when the straight met the crooked, a picture of what the crooked did to the straight, what it would do to him if he remained straight. And it says there's a sentence just before that Christianity was nonsense, but one did not doubt that the man had lived and had been executed thus by the Belbury of those days.
Yeah.
Um, so Frost's pressuring him, telling him to get on with it. And Mark realizes that Frost and Wither and possibly Strake are actually the only full initiates into the
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Um, and he says as well, for him who took the right steps. Uh, oh, hang on, no, that's a second bit. So a bit further on, his response, he reflecting. All these feelings are coming up. He's feeling helpless, and then turns to Frost and he says, "It's all bloody nonsense, and I'm damned if I do any such thing."
Hmm.
And then they're interrupted as Wither and the fake Merlin and the interpreter come into the room. So we should probably mention why there's an interpreter there.
Yes. But before you do that, though, I'll just
Oh yeah.
say here that the reason you're right that there are just a few true initiates, and the reason why they feel the need that they must get Mark to be fully initiated is because he has shown to them that he's in the inner circle with the tramp, the fake Merlin. Therefore, they think that if he's fully initiated, he'll be able to get inside the head of this tramp Merlin. And so that
Okay. Yes.
time's a wasting and they have to hurry up and do that. But carry on.
Yeah. And so they get interrupted, and it's Wither and the tramp and a third person who is the interpreter that they've hired. And this is where we see the plan kind of coming together. So what's happened is we skipped over it, but Merlin, when he was visited by the five gods, was imbued with powers, and that it's interesting because that bit is really it's not they don't dwell on it at all.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
There's this long section about a description about each of the gods arriving and how it affects everybody, and then it just says, then they proceeded to operation. Merlin received the power into him. He looked different the next day.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically all it says about that whole process.
Yeah.
Um, his beard had been shaved, so but he was no longer his own man.
Yes.
Later in the day, McPhee dropped him off and dropped him in the neighborhood of Belbury. And it turns out what's happened is that Belbury's put out an advertisement looking for translators because they're trying all these different languages on the fake Merlin to communicate with him. And he's just sitting there giving them nothing because he senses, I think, that they're up to no good. And so the real Merlin poses as a translator, applies for the role, and gets in there and starts to work his magic. And so he insists at one point that he gets shown around the whole facility and Wither. Oh no! So what the translator Merlin, the real Merlin, acting as translator does, he hypnotizes the tramp and he gets him to speak a lot of stuff that nobody can understand, and then he translates it, and in this way he kind of keeps up this facade going, and he gives them
Yeah.
lots of instructions, and
Yeah.
it's all hilarious. And
Yeah.
part of it is he says Merlin demands to be shown around the whole
Yes.
facility, and Wither is all kind of, oh, okay, yes, fawning over Merlin and amazed at this breakthrough, and takes them off on this tour.
Okay.
They crash into the room where Mark's refusing to trample on the crucifix, and that's what it saves Mark from having to
Hmm.
do anything else. And then we get a scene which is the fake director, Mr. Jules, and this is where it tells us that he regarded himself as the real director of the institute.
Hmm.
And it turns out that this is where Wither comes in handy because his sort of beating around the bush style of speaking is really necessary to deal with Jules, and none of the other people at Belbury can do it. So they're all standing around listening to him and giving him drinks. And C.S. Lewis gets a few more jabs in. Jules was a cockney. He was a very little man whose legs were so short that he had unkindly been compared with a duck. He had a turned up nose and a face in which some original bonhomie had been much interfered with by years of good living and conceit. And he just reinforces that it's really only his name that is necessary to the nice,
Yeah.
and he doesn't have any other valuable qualities. And there's a little bit that is mentioned where Jules is talking, and he's kind of holding court on various topics. And he says to Philostrato, who's trying to keep him happy and distracted until the director gets there, he says, Yes, yes, says Philostrato. This is the real business. Already we begin. I try to help you all I can on the non-technical side, said Jules. It's a battle I've been fighting for years. The whole question of our sex life. What I always say is that once you get the whole thing out into the open, you don't have any more trouble. It's all this Victorian secrecy which does the harm, making a mystery of it. I want every boy and girl in the country. God, said Feverstone to himself. So he gets cut off. So we don't know where he was going with that line there. I want every boy and girl in the country. But it reminds me that the Fabian Society, when it was originally founded, had a gentleman, well, maybe not a gentleman, I'm not sure, but he was called Havelock Ellis,
Oh,
who's a
yes, yes.
sexologist. And he left fairly soon after they were founded, but he was there at the beginning. So this and then and also it echoes Huxley, the Brave New Worldian practice of sort of getting young children involved in sexual games and
And
sexualized at a
Russell,
very early
yeah,
age, and Bertrand Russell's
yeah.
experimental school. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it kind of just hints that and then kind of moves on very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all I have for the rest of that chapter, I think. Wither turns up and kind of calms Jules down, introduces the tramp and the translator as Dr. Ambrosius and his interpreter. And that's the end of the chapter, pretty much, I think. There's nothing else to say there. And then we're on to chapter 16.
16 is entitled Banquet at Belbury.
I really
And
enjoyed this chapter. I
oh,
was
yes.
quite surprised at
Yeah.
how brutally gruesome it was, but I did enjoy it.
So it seems like, I mean, let's just see if I have any notes here. Mine aren't really to the action, but a couple of things that come up within it. But so here we are. Everybody's getting ready. This is why Jules has been brought in. Jules is there for the banquet. He's the public face of the nice. And so they're all there. I don't know if it's more fundraising or, but it's a big, important public facing event. And Mark is getting dressed for that, and the chapter starts off. It was with great pleasure that Mark found himself once more dressing for dinner, and what seemed likely to be an excellent dinner. So again, it's just showing Mark isn't, he's not quite convicted. He's had some experiences. He refused to go all the way with his objectivity training. He doesn't desecrate the crucifix, and here he is again going to satisfy some sensual desire. He's going to have a banquet. I'm going to eat and drink and be merry. And literally, it kind of goes to pot really quickly. So it just it turns into a bit of a bloodbath and it gets crazy.
It's good. I like the the language and the words as well.
The
Because
first word, oh, sorry, but the first word that gets us into the language and the words is the word cavalry or Calvary. It's a gross anachronism to trust to Calvary for salvation in modern war. So he says Calvary when he really meant cavalry. So
mm,
he gets to have a discussion about war cavalry as opposed to Calvary for salvation. So there's the first word that we are presented with. Carry on.
yeah, great. That's a good spot. I hadn't I kind of glossed over that and not really picked up on it. But yeah. Um there's a speech going on, and then people gradually one by one start to notice and pay attention to the speaker. And Frost thinks is it Wither giving the speech? Oh no,
It's
it's Jules, sorry.
Jules.
It's Jules. Jules giving the speech, and Frost thinks he's drunk.
Yeah.
Then, crystal clear and articulation beyond all possibility of mistake, came the words, The Madrigore of Verjuice must be talthibiumized. Wither was slower to notice what was happening. He'd never expected the speech to have any meaning as a whole, and for a long time the familiar catchwords rolled on in a manner which did not disturb the expectation of his ear. He thought, indeed, that Jules was sailing very near the wind, that a very small false step would deprive both the speaker and the audience of the power even to pretend that he was saying anything in particular. But as long as that border was not crossed, he rather admired the speech. It was his own line. Then he thought, come, that's going too far. Then came the sentence, the surrogates s implanted in a continual of porous variations. Mark, and then Mark sort of he's one of the last to notice as well. And this is a bit that I had a good chuckle at this bit as well. He says Mark starts to notice that everyone except himself is paying attention and looking up at Jules. And then first he really listened. We shall not, Jules was saying. We shall not till we can secure the erebation of all postundiary initems. Little as he cared for Jules, a sudden shock of alarm pierced him. He looked around again. Obviously, it was not he who was mad. They had all heard the gibberish. Except, possibly, the tramp, who looked as solemn as a judge. He had never heard a speech from one of these real toughs before and would have been disappointed if he could understand it. I really like that tramp. He's a great little side
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
So there's this kind of, and then I think the deputy director steps up and he tries to get Jules to sit down, and then he starts to give a speech, and the audience hear, Tidies and Fugelman, I shield for that we all most steeply rebut the defensible, though I trust lavatory, Aspasia, which gleams to have selected our redeemed inspector this deceiving. It would be shark, very shark, from anyone's debenture. It's so good. It's so well done. And then there's a woman who laughs, and she finds it. She starts to get hysterical, and the man seated next to her heard her murmur in his ear, "Vood wooloo." The man on the other side of her saw her fall and saw the first man's expression of fury. But are you Blamit? He roared, leaning towards him with a threatening movement. Several of the younger men were making for the door. Bundleman, Bundleman, said Wither sternly in a much louder voice. And what it turns out is that they've all been put under the curse of Babel.
Yeah.
And so this is why your solo what was it, late amble ramble
Yes.
last week was so good to remind us and tell us where the title of the novel comes from, being a poem about the Tower of Babel, right? So they get the curse of Babel put on them, and it even affects their writing, because Miss
Yeah.
Hardcastle makes a oh no, somebody, I think Frost gives a note to Miss Hardcastle, and it says, Miss Hardcastle smoothed out the paper and stooped her head to read. The message ran, Blunt frippers instantly to pointed bedeluroid, purgent, cost. She crumpled it up in her hand. And then chaos ensues. Miss Hardcastle goes to get a gun and shoots Jules. I didn't quite understand why.
Well, because it's
She
Miss Hardcastle. She
Yeah,
just,
she just sees the opportunity to go crazy with a
I
gun.
never liked him.
Yeah, never liked him anyway. So she shoots Jules and then just opens fire. She
Yeah.
fired again and again. But then there's a flash, there's a movement. Everyone gasps. Something goes quickly between the tables and under the table. And then Mark realizes it's a tiger. And then after the tiger, an Alsatian shows up. Then there's a snake, then a gorilla, then an elephant. And these animals keep coming into the room, and all the doors are locked. Nobody can escape. And of course, these are the animals that were kept at Belbury for the purpose of vivisection,
Yeah.
which have been unleashed and freed to get their revenge and exact their get give the comeuppance to the people of Belbury. And this is, it is quite gruesome, and It says the animals did not stop to eat what they killed, or not more than to take one lick of the blood. There were dead and dying bodies everywhere by now,
Yeah.
and there's also a scrum of panicking diners trying to escape. That leads to the death of people getting trampled, and then yes, the elephant is the last one to show up. It's quite a good description of how the elephant arrives, and then Mark passes out and doesn't know what else is going on.
And one of the animals there that had been captured a little bit earlier was the director's beloved bear, his pet bear, Mr. Bultitude.
Yeah,
So Mr. Bultitude has now been imprisoned at the Nice, and as the animals who were there for vivisection, and we assume that was the fate that was to meet Mr. Bultitude, he's now escaped with the other animals, and they are all on a murderous rampage, which
it's funny as
is
well. The whole description of Mr. Bultitude waking up in the cage, surrounded by the chaos, but
yeah.
he can sniff out a female bear as well,
Yes.
and also food, and so he gets very
Yeah.
excited. And then Merlin, I think, bumps into him and sort of whispers something in his ear,
Mhm.
and then he goes off. Um, so the next scene we get is this the next scene? Oh, so there's a little bit here about the tramp, who, finding Merlin's back turned on him for a second, made his escape, first into the kitchen, and thence, reinforced with all the edibles in his pockets would hold, into the wide world. I have, and then and then Lewis writes, I have not been able to trace him further. And it's like one of the only
Yeah.
times that Lewis breaks the narrative to comment as the
Yeah.
writer and the
Yeah.
author, and I just thought it was a really nice touch because that
Yeah.
tramp is a great little sort of sub character there. Um, and then we kind of get the fate of some of the individual members of the Nice, and we join Wither, and
It says Wither was not among those killed in the dining room because among those killed in the dining room, and this is what as crazy and vivid and blood-filled a scene as the banquet is, there was something on the first reading for me that was almost kind of anticlimactic because, for instance, Miss Hardcastle, this just evil, sadistic creature. She's just killed by an animal. There's no aha, at last we get we get to tear you limb from limb. That's it. She's gone. But it says Wither was not among those killed in the dining room. He naturally knew all the possible ways out of the room, and even before the coming of the tiger, he had slipped away. He understood what was happening, if not perfectly, yet better than anyone else. So,
yeah, so he knows the fake translator, the interpreter, had done the whole
mhm,
thing, and this is where he realizes as well that he knew that powers more human had come down to destroy Belbury.
mhm,
Only one in the saddle of whose soul rode Mercury himself could thus have unmade language. And this again told him something worse. It meant that his own dark masters had been completely out in their calculations. So this is when he realizes that he's kind of overestimated the power of his allies, the macrobes. But then he goes on to say it's incredible how little this knowledge moved him. It could not, because he had long ceased to believe in knowledge itself.
mm,
He had passed from Hegel into Hume, thence through pragmatism, and thence through logical positivism, and out, at last, into the complete void. The indicative mood now corresponded to no thought that his mind could entertain. He had willed with his whole heart that there should be no reality and no truth, and now even the imminence of his own ruin could not wake him. I thought it was interesting that C.S. Lewis listed that path, that
uh-huh,
route: Hegel, Hume, pragmatism, logical positivism, and then out into the complete void.
mhm.
Um, it was good that he threw those names in there and those sort of isms, just as a sort of warning and a caution to people, right? If you go down this path, there's sort of an inevitability to where you'll end up, and that's also one of Mark's realizations at some point when he's reflecting on
Uh-huh.
in the cell in the prison. He says, "Oh yeah, this is the logical outcome of the way I think."
Huh?
Meaning Frost's point of view and the things that Frost is saying to him. He sort of says, "Yeah, that's exactly where it goes to think like this and be like this."
The progression too that you're talking about, the way C.S. Lewis gives us this, especially when you combine it with the abolition of man, the non-fictional, to remind ourselves that the nice is this is about the outcome of this kind of academia in service for an agenda. And there was a place, I think we missed it a little bit earlier, but, or maybe it comes later, I don't know, but it's somebody, oh, it's later. It's at the very final chapter. But this is the outcome. It's what we would have today as the woke agenda.
Mm,
And when I saw that what he was using in this chapter was that hideous strength, the curse of Babel, I started thinking, it was actually just this morning, it occurred to me, well, where are we then if you can't say he is a man or she is a woman, or you have to assign they, them to someone because they want to be called they, them, then is that not the curse of Babel, where words cease to have meaning and everyone on all experts come out and say they had a gender reassignment? What does that mean?
mm.
It's Babel. It's pure Babel.
Or
And
even just the use of words that we assume we know what they mean and we think, but they're totally misused. And here in our countries in this part of the world, we're told we have freedom and we are and people will say this. I saw on, I think it was on Twitter or something, or maybe Instagram. What's your favorite word? And this person replied, "Freedom." And I thought we are so far away from having freedom that it's obviously not what we have. But people will, with a straight face, say they hate us for our freedoms and we need to defend our freedoms and we have so much freedom. So the words that people use and they throw around, they've really not thought about the definition of those
uh-huh,
words. They haven't gone into what does this actually mean. And if you often said to someone, well, oh, okay, before we go down that road, why don't you define the word freedom for me? What does it
mhm.
mean? They'll get that can get people's back up, and they'll be like, oh, I'm not, you know what I mean when I
Yeah,
say freedom.
except
Yeah.
of course,
Stop being
yes.
so pedantic.
Okay, so then it goes on. So we know Wither is alive, and
One thing I wanted to mention though,
oh,
as well, just from this section, is that just this, from the same paragraph, the last moments before damnation are not often so dramatic. Often the man knows with perfect clarity that some still possible action of his own will could yet save him, but he cannot make this knowledge real to himself. Some tiny habitual sensuality, some resentment too trivial to waste on a blue bottle, the indulgence of some fatal lethargy seems to him at that moment more important than the choice between total joy and total destruction. With eyes wide open, seeing that the endless terror is just about to begin, and yet, for the moment, unable to feel terrified, he watches passively, not moving a finger for his own rescue, while the last links with joy and reason are severed, and drowsily sees the trap close upon his soul. So full of sleep are they at the time when they leave the right way. So it was a really good
it
passage
was.
and
I'm glad you
notes
read that
there.
because I did have that whole thing marked off, and it's again, you could say that's a banality of evil.
Mm,
It's just his descent has been so long in the making, and every time he's had the opportunity to choose the right way, he has not until he can't even exercise that for his own to save himself. He cannot do it. That was a good scene. It said here that Strake and Philostrato were alive,
Hmm.
and they round the corner and they see someone that they never thought they'd see again, which is Wither. And do you want to tell us about that? It's a
This is where it gets kind of even more gruesome and
yeah.
it's creepy and strange. But basically, Strake and Wither grab Philostrato, and Philostrato tries to decline, but he can't because none of them can speak. So they're all sort of pointing and just moving without communicating. But Philostrato accompanied them per force. So he's kind of grabbed on both sides and marched with these two, with Wither and Strake. And it says that squealing and shivering with pain, Philostrato accompanied them perforce, but worse awaited him. He was not an initiate. He knew nothing of the dark Eldila. He believed that his skill had kept Alcasan's brain alive. Hence, even in his pain, he cried out with horror when he found the other two drawing him through the anteroom of the head and into the head's presence, without pausing for any of those antiseptic preparations which he had always imposed on his colleagues. So he gradually comes to realize that he's in for something kind of gruesome, something kind of scary. And what happens is that the head is animated and it speaks, and it hasn't been switched on. It hasn't had its it hasn't been juiced up with the fake saliva and, and all the other stuff that they pump into it from the other room, and yet it speaks.
Mhm.
And it says, what does it say?
A
Adore.
door. Yeah. Now, at this also right here at this scene is that um, Strake and Wither have taken their clothes off and they ripped the clothes off of Philostrato too. And there they are in front of the head, which says a door. And so this just becomes this horrifying. Again, we're at it's almost like an objectivity. It's one more initiation right for the initiated.
Mhm.
And what do they say? This one was really quite fascinating there. They're in a rhythmic, obscene kind of bowing down to the head, and they say, Ora Borindra, Ora Borindra. And I wrote in the margin here, Ouroboros.
Yeah.
It's the eternal thing. It's the serpent eating its tail over and over and over again. This is the ritual, though, that they must do. And then tell us what happened to Philostrato.
Well, there's a there's a little hatch in the side. It's amazing what he yeah, there's a little hatch and they slide it open, and it's kind of embedded in the wall is a this hatch with a little window, but the sash, the window edge is actually a knife, and it turns out that this thing is a guillotine. And they put Philostrato in there and off with his head. The head demands
Yep.
uh, of Strake and well, of all three, it says another, give me another head.
Hmm.
And then Philostrato figures it out because he's the one who installed the guillotine in the wall. But it's amazing because when it how it describes his thought when he's saying they're going to do it wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
He's like, the little
yeah.
guillotine was not meant to be used like this. They were going to murder him uselessly, unscientifically. If he were doing it to one of them, all would have been different. Everything would have been prepared weeks beforehand. The temperature of both rooms, the blades sterilized, the attachments ready to go. He had even calculated what changes the terror of the victim would probably make in his blood pressure. The artificial bloodstream would be arranged accordingly. Yeah, so this is the thing they use to chop the head off that they can then plug up with tubes and keep alive, right? So the two initiates, they chop Philostrato's head off. Then they stand before the head again, chanting Ura Borindra. Then the same thought struck both of them at one moment. It will ask for another. And so they immediately turn on each other and start fighting. And Wither comes out as the more, uh, surprisingly, the more, I suppose, because his devotion or his, excuse me, allegiance is stronger. But he manages to kill Strake. And after that, he hears a sound and he realizes that something is moving towards him and that they left the door open.
Mhm.
And then it says, next moment he drew back. A huge bear, rising to its hind legs as he came in sight of it, had met him in the doorway, its mouth open, its eyes flaming, its forepaws spread out as if for an embrace. Was this what Strake had become? He knew, though even now he could not attend to it, that he was on the very frontier of a world where such things could happen. And of course, this is Mr. Bultitude
Mhm.
coming in to finish off Wither. And I think that's the end of that gruesome, strange, very uncomfortable scene. One of the thoughts I just had though there about this because I wrote Ouroboros as well, and there's sort of like two ways it can go, isn't there? There's you can because Ouroboros, the process, part of the process is this eternal death and renewal
Mhm.
of life, and so you can kind of go, you can worship that in two ways. You could worship the death
Mhm.
and cause more death and be involved in that, and or you could worship the creation of life, the birth.
Mhm.
And this is sort of um, connected to how the final chapter ends, I think. Oh, this is the
Mhm.
final chapter. We're in the final chapter now. Oh no,
Well,
not quite.
we got one more, but that it's not much of a
No.
chapter. But so then what happens is we next is that we see Feverston. That
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Feverston, he's like, "Oh, I'm out of here." And so he gets in his car and he's, driving along. But something kind of takes him over as he decides he's gonna go back to Edgestowe. And he just drove off the road and starts driving into a field at breakneck speed. And he said, "Am I tight?" Meaning drunk. I'll break my neck at this game if I don't look out. But the car went on as if driven by one who regarded this track as an excellent road and the obvious route to Edgestowe. Now, Frost had left the dining room a few minutes after Wither, and he did not know what he was going to do. And so this tells you his thought process and what he thinks about human emotions and so forth. It says the nearest thing to a human passion which still existed in him was a sort of cold fury against all who believed in the mind. There was no tolerating such an illusion. So he's already completely detached from everything. He's so given over to the dark side that nothing remains. Thus, Frost, whose existence Frost denied, so he's already outside of himself, outside of all human existence. He watched his body go into the anteroom. So he sees this whole thing. He goes to the garage. The place is silent and empty, the snow thick on the ground. He locked himself into all he could think. Okay, he piled all the inflammables he could think of together in the objective room. So he goes into the objective room, piles it up with anything that'll burn, locked himself in by locking the outer door of the anteroom. Whatever it was that dictated his actions then compelled him to push the key into the speaking tube which communicated with the passage. When he pushed it as far as his fingers could reach, he took a pencil from his pocket and pushed that. Presently, he heard the clink of the key falling to the passage floor outside. In other words, he's given himself no escape. That tiresome illusion, his consciousness, was screaming to protest. His body, even had he wished, had no power to attend to those screams. So, what he did was he set fire to himself. And it's just very matter of fact, he's done. Not until he had poured the petrol all over himself and everything in that room and lit it with a match, not till then did his controllers allow him to suspect that death itself might not, after all, cure the illusion of being a soul. Nay, might prove the entry into a world where that illusion raged infinite and unchecked. Escape for the soul, if not for the body, was offered him. He became able to know and simultaneously refused the knowledge that he had been wrong from the beginning, that souls and personal responsibility existed. He half saw, he wholly hated. The physical torture of the burning was not fiercer than his hatred of that. With one supreme effort, he flung himself back into his illusion. In that attitude, eternity overtook him as sunrise in old tales overtakes and turns them into unchangeable stone. So, right at the very last, he is able, because this is what the dark Eldila want. They want your soul. Simple as that. Because if you look at the Ouroboros, what is it? The Dark Eldila will find someone else to go through the birth and death process. You know, the great work continues regardless of who loses their soul in the process of bringing the great work into being. So he is so detached from this, he knew in that moment, oh, I was wrong from the very beginning. I have a soul. I'm about to lose it. He's so full of hatred, he cannot stop. And that is the end of chapter 16.
One of the things I wanted to add there as well is that it reminds me of discussions that we've had prior with regards perfect possession and psychopathy,
Mm-hmm.
and how in the last few examples here, all these Bellbury nice scientists are possessed in one form or another, taken over, right? You got, I think, Merlin in the back of the car controls Feverston, and he has no way to resist that. Then, of course, Frost here is under control, the controllers, and it's that giving up of your agency and signing it over to something else, an entity
Mm-hmm.
or a macrobe or whatever it might be. And I just hadn't sort of connected that they've all done that, and they all have this in common, that they're under the control of other entities. In the
Mm-hmm.
same way, and it's the opposite way with Merlin, who does that, but the entities he submits and surrenders to are the good ones, like the on the side of light and life and rebirth and nature, and rather than anti and against all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a theme that I hadn't really sort of considered before, but it's there. It's very strong actually.
Mm-hmm. It
And then we've
is.
got the final chapter, chapter
Which
17.
is Venus at St. Anne's.
Okay. I've actually been writing these chapters down, the chapter names, which I haven't been doing. So I've just got the last four now, but
Okay.
I'll get the others off you at some point. Yeah, I liked so it starts with Mark, and what I really liked is everything's covered in snow, thick, deep snow. So it's a new beginning, it's fresh, it's virginal, it's white, it's pure. And it- Mark kind of wakes up. We didn't check back in with Mark. He blacked out during the slaughter, and he sort of wakes up, and Merlin's there, and Merlin tells him, gives him the message, and says he has to go to St. Anne's, and slaps him on the back, and then he starts running, and he's kind of uncontrollably running at top speed because of this pat on the back that he gets from Merlin. And then eventually he slows down and he stops and he gets a lift in a lorry, and then he ends up at a little country hotel. And I really like this bit because it's all the things I've talked about before, the comforting things like when Jane's in the riot earlier in the book and she gets comforted by sort of sandwiches and slices of cake
It's
and it's
normal.
yeah, it's normal. That's it. So it's a kind, yeah. So he goes to the hotel and it's a kind elderly landlady and a hot bath and a capital breakfast. And then he goes to sleep in a chair next to a fire. And then he has tea and a boiled egg with his tea, and there's two shells with some books on there. And reconnects with a story that he abandoned when he was 10 years old because he wanted to read adult things. And he really enjoys it. And
And,
this
and
is
and
really nice.
do you know what he's reading?
Uh,
Sherlock
Sherlock
Holmes.
Holmes. And so yeah, he's kind of traveling back to St. Anne's basically,
Hmm.
and he has survived, and he's reflecting. And this is where he says he reflects on how he's going to give Jane her freedom. I think he does mention this earlier, but it's
Hmm.
repeated here. And he says they, meaning Jane and the Dimbles and everybody, they were hearts. He was only a spade. Of
Hmm.
course, Jane was a heart. He must give her her freedom. It would be quite unjust to think that his love for her had been basely sensual. Mark's body knew better than his mind had known till recently, and even his sensual desires were the true index of something which he lacked and Jane had to give. So he's thinking along the lines of finding Jane and just saying, look, you're free. I get it. I know I'm not, um, this marriage isn't what it should be, and giving her that freedom. Then we go to, yeah, I don't know anything on that section you wanted to add.
Mm-mm.
I didn't have much else. I also don't have a lot of
No,
notes for this
I
final
mean,
chapter. It's
to me, the thing, I don't know that I marked it here, but one of the good scenes, because remember I said Miss Hardcastle, it's just over. She takes her
yeah.
gun out and kills Jules, and then, she gets eaten or attacked by the tiger. Well, Feverstone, remember, the car's been taken over and he's just driving. Everyone appears to be fleeing from Edgestow,
Mm,
or they don't know why. I wouldn't say fleeing is a good word. They just are leaving for inexplicable reasons. They aren't at Edgestow anymore. And they all talk about it later, like that thing that happened at Edgestow that we weren't there. If I hadn't gotten that letter from my father, I would have been at Edgestow that day. Well, unlike all of those who have the opportunity to leave, Feverstone doesn't know where he is. He's got the car ends up in a ditch, and he's got this massive figure, which we know is Merlin, and it seems to impel him to compel him to go another direction. There's a gate there. And Feverston says he has no idea where he was. But clearly, the first thing to do was reach the road, and it took him much longer than expected. So he's walking, he's going along, and then somebody, Feverston says, "You're going to Edgestow." And the person said, "Good Lord, no. There's Edgestow if you want to go there." And then in the end, there was nothing to do but walk. And going on, going on. So Feverstone now found himself flung on his face, and this horrible thing, he's in deep water, the temperature's rising. He decided he wouldn't go down there because obviously something bad is happening down where Edgestow is. It's like a flood or some kind of catastrophe. So he says he would turn and follow the traffic, work over to the railway, and try to get to London. The picture of a steaming bath at his club and himself sitting in his smoking room and telling the whole story, how he escaped this thing. He was already a few paces down the hill when he made this decision and turned at once, but instead of going up, he found he was still descending. And every time he tried to go up, he was still descending. He got to his feet once again. He set his face to the hill. Behind the valley seemed to have turned into hell. And this is what was happening. So he's thinking himself, I don't think I marked it, but Feverstone at the very end, he's not having one of those moments where he says, "Oh, I always hated knowledge. I always hated consciousness." Nothing like that. Feverstone is basically justifying his actions. Oh, I never stole from a man unless I needed what he had. I never hurt anybody unless they got in my way. This is how he's justifying his actions. And so the end of Feverstone is that he is trying to escape Edgestow and he goes down with it. This is where this is how he meets his end. Can't escape it. And to the very last, he's just jollily justifying himself. There, old boy, you just got in my way. What could I do?
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's also earlier when he leaves Belbury, he sees what's going on. He actually watches the whole massacre, right? He gets out of the
Yeah,
room quickly and
yes.
he gets on the other side of this thing in the little hatch and he's looking through this hatch, smoking a cigarette, watching it all happen.
Yeah,
And it says that he's confident in his reaction so that he could close the hatch
yeah,
if he saw anything coming that way. And he just watches it, smoking a cigarette,
yeah.
sees it all unfold, and then he thinks to himself, okay, well, I've been lining up a nice job for myself at Edgestow. I'll go there. Right.
Yes,
And then,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
and Edgestow is being kind of like consumed by the earth. It's being swallowed up, and
yeah,
the ground is it's all like earthquakes and fire coming up,
yeah.
and yeah, he just basically he literally gets swallowed into it, doesn't he?
But yeah, you're right. He's the perfect, self-confident, cocky psychopath that's like, oh, hey, oh, wow, this is interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I
I,
forgot to
I never
mention
knew
that,
a
but
man could bleed out like that.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, great. And so it was good, satisfying.
Yeah.
And then he just what's the yeah, and he doesn't give you he's not he doesn't give you that what's going on in his mind during all this. It just says that yeah, he ends up his mouth and hair and nostrils are full of earth, and then there's a big kind of ridge and then it crashes down on him, and that's the end of
Hmm.
Feverston. So goodbye, Feverston. And it reminds me of the bit you read from Orwell's review of the book, where he talked about the nice encompassing science and politicians and religion and police and military. I think those were the four, right?
Hmm.
And Feverston's the politician, isn't he?
Hmm.
He's the
Hmm.
he's the kind of like smooth talking, manipulative psychopath who will get up there and say whatever needs to be said, and he'll just work people over and manipulate them for his own ends and adapt to new places and situations, moving from one group to another, just without any real allegiance or loyalty uh, at all. So, yeah.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that scene, the virtual, well, I don't have the page now in front of me, but the sex that I was saying that it took place now with their headset on. In that same movie, you've got exactly the Feverstone character who is a bureaucrat.
Oh,
And it,
Demolition Man?
and Demolition Man, that bureaucrat, he's like a kind of a fat kimono wearing character.
Okay.
And yeah, so when it gets set straight, when they go in there and kill all the bad guys, it's the bureaucrat who survives in the movie. And he immediately does a fever stun and just goes to the victors and says, "How can I help you?"
Yeah,
You know,
right.
you're the new master now, and I'm here. I know how this all works, and so let me help. And that's
Yeah,
who Feverstone is. There's no
that's it.
there's no morals, there's no ideology, there's no conviction. he knows how the game is played, and he's going to work with the victor, whoever the victor is,
Mm,
except it doesn't work out that way for
yeah.
him.
And that brings us pretty much to the final scene. We're
Yeah.
back in St. Anne's. We are with Ransom and the crew, and they are all. There's a couple of interesting things that I want to mention about
Okay.
this section, but basically, there's going to be a banquet, but a sort of good version without mass slaughter. But what so in my book, it's page 705, and Camilla and Dimble are talking, and it's Ransom and Grace as well. But they're talking about haunting. Camilla says, "What haunting?" asked Camilla, and it's quite an interesting bit. Um, let's see who. Not sure who's speaking here. It might be Dimble. Um,
I got
he
that mark
says,
too.
right. He says how something. Well, maybe I go back a bit further. So Dimble's Camilla says, "Where does Logres come in?" Because where does Logres
Hmm.
come into it? That's what they're
Hmm.
talking about. What is
Hmm.
Logres and why Logres? And Dimble's silent, and then he says, "It all began when we discovered that the Arthurian story is mostly true history.
Hmm.
There was a moment in the 6th century when something that is always trying to break through into this country nearly succeeded. Logres was our name for it. It will do as well as another. And then gradually we began to see all English history in a new way. We discovered the haunting." What haunting? Asked Camilla. "How something we may call Britain is always haunted by something we may call Logres. Haven't you noticed that we are two countries? After every Arthur, a Mordred. Behind every Milton, a Cromwell. A nation of poets, a nation of shopkeepers. The home of Sidney and of Cecil Rhodes.
Hmm.
Is it any wonder that they call us hypocrites? But what they mistake for hypocrisy is really the struggle between Logres and Britain." And Cecil Rhodes' name jumped right off the page there. And then I was also thinking about how the NICE is an institute. And of course, you have the Royal Institute for International Affairs that
Uh-huh.
Alan talks about so often. And I'll show you as well that I got in the post the other day my copy
Oh,
of,
you got it. Oh,
yeah, British Commonwealth in the Future.
that's
It's
so
kind of,
great. Okay, open it up so that we can see the front pages because the spine on those is so. Oh, that's
yeah.
great, Nick. Oh,
I was really happy to
beautiful.
find that.
Yay. Good, good, good.
So that's safe and sound in the Hayes Reviews library now. And I'm looking forward to reading that at some point. But yeah, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, of course, is the subject of um, a large part of Anglo-American establishment by Carroll Quigley, and was very close to Cecil Rhodes was very close to the people who created that. It was his
Hmm.
will kind of directed and executed under by Rothschild, I think, who and Lord Milner, and that
Hmm.
continuity is right there. So for Cecil Rhodes to get a mention here, and then for the enemy, the bad guys in the novel to be an institute, I thought, oh, maybe that's a little nod, a little connection there.
Yes, and I have to mention the juxtaposition too there because it's Cecil Rhodes is Britain versus Sydney, who would be Logres, the Arthurian.
Mhm.
And Sydney is, of course, is the Elizabethan poet, but he's not just Sydney died young, very, very young, fighting the Spanish. So he factors in the conflict between Protestants and Catholics.
Okay.
But he also is writing about, again, love, courtly love, these whole ideas that C.S. Lewis is bringing in here in that this what you'd call baptized love, the highest ideals or agape or whatever, the
Mm,
very highest ideals. So it's the poetic ideal versus the mechanical, the the nice.
yeah.
That's
The
going to control
expansion, the
every, yeah,
dominating,
you're going to control
the
every
yeah.
aspect of your life. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good bit. And then they talk about the secret Logres in the very heart of Britain, which is an unbroken succession of pendragons. And then there was a teaser here because it says that on this night we're going to find out who the next Pendragon is. And then C.S. Lewis never tells us.
I
And I was like,
know.
dude, why?
I
How could you
know.
not tell us? So that was kind of I was sort of in agreement a little bit with Orwell's assessment of the ending. Although I enjoyed it and I loved every, reading right up to the last page, Orwell was sort of like, well, the ending was not very good. It would be better if there was none of that supernatural mumbo jumbo in there. But yeah, so we don't actually find out who the next Pendragon is, but we can kind of all guess, I suppose, and theorize about that. Um, what else from this section?
Well, I think I mean, I think the main thing is they do have a banquet, and it is a celebration of Venus. And so the men do the cooking and the women adorn themselves in finery. And
Yeah.
there is, and C.S. Lewis loves the wardrobe, right? The wardrobe is the piece of furniture that lets you go into another world.
Mm.
It's the magic door that opens that up. So here, Ransom has given them a wardrobe in which each woman has a costume that really kind of is the essence of her. So, Mrs. Dimble has a costume that's for her. It's not over the top. It's certainly nothing that she would go, oh, I can't be dressing in something like that. But as it turns out, it's a beautiful piece of finery that just fits her personality. And so this is what happens. They have this, and the animals are all chilled out again. Mr. Bultitude has brought his woman home.
Yeah.
So he's got the female bear, and they're off.
And then
And
don't a
really,
pair of elephants show up? Like all the
yes.
animals show up in
Yep.
pairs, a male and a female, don't they?
Yes. And there is also something sexual about this. It's the mating up, it's the pairing off, but it's not descended into an orgy. It's the perfect complement. Each animal or human has its perfect complement, and they go off together after having this celebration. Venus, and so that Mark and Jane are going to be okay because Mark is there. He's obviously going to help with the dinner preparation, and Jane has her perfect outfit. And the final scene where they are to be together was one that I understood but didn't understand, because Jane arrives at their little cabin. She now understands that she's to go and be with him, really be with him. And when she arrives, oh, Mark gets there first, and Mark is greeted by Venus. And that's really quite something. He is greeted by Venus, and it blows his mind. It's this goddess of love who illuminates the entire little cabin there. And Jane arrives, and the whole cabin is lit up crazy. And she is, standing there. Am I going in? Yes, I really am going in. Am I going in? And she looks and she sees Mark's clothes like in a pile on the floor. And her thought is, oh, kind of like just like him, because when we start out, Jane does one thing. She thinks about John Donne while she's thinking about her unhappy marriage. But the one thing she actually does is clean her house. So here she is at the very end, looking in, seeing it all illuminated, and his pile of clothes, and just like him to leave a pile of clothes. So in she goes. So I'm left scratching my head, going, well, wait a minute, what's going on there? Mark is in this illuminated cabin and he's got his clothes off. But what it is that the essence of the goddess has inhabited the cabin. It's illuminated the cabin, and Jane goes to take her place there with the blessing of the goddess of love. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What in her conversation with the director as well, and just to back up slightly, there's some pretty good bits where these animals are all kind of getting raunchy and and pairing off and they're all sort of like, oh, what's going on? Mexing is kind of oh well, at least no hippopotamus or elephants have showed up. Then the elephants show up and they start dancing, and he says, "I hope they're not gonna, do it." And the director says, "Oh no, they'll be private like human lovers." And then there's a sound that they think is hedgehogs, and then the director says, "It's my friends behind the wainscot." So if you remember, he puts some crumbs on the floor and rings a bell, and the mice come out and eat the crumbs and run back in. And he says, "We don't need to be enemies, right? I want rid of my crumbs, and they want to take the crumbs. Let's
Yeah.
let's live in this kind of cooperative relationship." And then Jane talks to him, and they have this conversation, and he says, basically, he says, "Go be with your husband." And she asks, "Am I a bear or a hedgehog?" And he says, "More, but not less. Go
Hmm.
in obedience, and you will find love. You will have no more dreams. Have children instead."
Hmm.
I really like that. I thought it was good
Hmm.
because I hadn't thought about it, but Jane and Mark haven't, maybe they've been together once in the whole book. Does he come back at one point, quite early before, he goes to um
I don't think so. I
Belgrade,
think
comes
that
back,
he
or they
he
separate all the
misses
way
her.
through?
Yeah, they're separate the
Okay,
whole way through. Um,
right.
and I
So
think
we
it's
actually haven't
yeah.
seen them together. That we've just
No.
charted their individual separate
Yeah.
journeys, and then I kind of read that last bit thinking about it is she's got Maleldil in her mind, God. She's got the director below that, and now she's gonna go and be with Mark, who's gonna be kind of below the director, but still in that sort of hierarchy. And the way I read it was like she looks in and she sees the way that he's chucked his shirts around, and she's kind of like, obviously it's high time she goes in because she's got to go in and
Yeah.
tidy and keep things organized and kind
Yeah.
of be of service as a wife to her husband. And I know
Yes.
that probably made people's toes curl, some people in the audience, because they don't like to hear that kind of thing. But that's kind of how I read it. It's like,
Well, I
okay,
think I
get
think
in
you're
there and give it a
right.
go.
The part that, that made me, I mean, I think that's exactly what happened with Jane and with Mark, and they live happily ever after. But I think that what kind of got my mind going is like, well, wait a minute. Mark gets there first, but the place is lit up and he opens the door and there's this amazing creature there. Well, but it's the goddess of love.
Mhm.
So she has blessed the home. And then Jane goes in there. And I think that, there's a couple of things here is that C.S. Lewis he's not presenting you a Gnostic view of good and evil. He's not giving you the Gnostic view that spirit is better than body. He's
Mhm.
giving you a complete view that we are here having an experience, and that means that we eat, we have banquets, and we mate, we pair up, and it's all good. And it's when you try to make it not good that you go down the nice path, where
Mhm.
you're separating things out and there you're he used the word ascetic several times when talking
Yeah.
about the nice and the people involved there. There's a separation of themselves from real human experience and real emotion and all of that. And the other thing that the final scenes reminded me of is, remember Darren said, I see parallels here to Dante. And, so we're rising up out of hell. And what are the final virtues that you ascend to? Well, the highest of them for Dante, and also obviously for C.S. Lewis, is love. So they literally have ascended all the way up out of this horrible hell that sucks Edgestowe down. And then, everybody else gets to live happily ever after in love. So it's good. It's good.
We did it.
We did. Yay.
That's
Yay,
the
us. Yeah, yeah, I know. That's all three of them.
that's all three done. Well, yeah, I don't really have anything more to add to that. I think I
Yeah.
just really enjoyed going through these books, picking them apart, having these discussions, throwing around these ideas, and there's so much in here, and I'm sure I will come back and read them again at some point. I will try and encourage my son to read them when he starts reading. I'm trying to read books in front of my son as much as I can. He kind of looks at me and he looks at the book and he's sort of like, what is going on here? And I'm just like, yeah, reading. Um, and yeah, so I'm just trying to model that so he sees it happening a lot, and we try and avoid scrolling on the phone or using the phones at all around him.
Good.
And so hopefully one day I may pass this copy to him and he'll be like, Dad, you've highlighted all this. Look at all these pencil marks. But yeah, it's been great. I've really enjoyed going through this. I hope everyone who's followed along has enjoyed these videos as well. I know it's been quite a, I don't know, it's been a bit of a workout
It
for
has been. I
people.
mean, I have to say, yes, I know that a scanner darkly is going to be a cakewalk. We're going to do it in one video. It's going to be amazing. But I am also going to put up soon, maybe even before I publish this on New Year's Day, I'm going to put up the nearly 5 hours of reading the Huxleys talk about evolution
Wow.
that, yeah, that I recorded last week. So I'm just
So
gonna,
that was just you reading it
that's
in.
just me reading it. I
Oh,
read
nice.
Thomas Huxley's lecture, and then I read Julian Huxley's lecture on evolution. And let's see, it's good. There was so much in here because C.S. Lewis had that kind of an education, and he was drawing from this and drawing from that. And you've got this, incredible activity going on at Oxford. So I'll give you that, but we are done with this. Yay.
Well done, us. And thank
Yeah.
you to Judy for the scarves. I don't think we could have done it without
No, we couldn't
the
have.
our stylish upgrades that we've had.
Yeah. And
Uh,
and again, I've got the Gabrielle wrist warmers on, and I really needed it today. But the house is cold. The heat keeps, kicking in, but it's pretty cold here. We Texans are just not used to it. I'm too far removed from Canada now. I've forgotten what it's like to be hardy and tough and
yeah,
like,
yeah, I bet.
yeah. Yeah. So, well, listen, everyone. I believe that next week is going to be Neil Foster because today is actually the first Thursday of the month, and that means that next one will be the second, and I think he'll be done with work. So that's the plan that I'll stick to, and we shall keep you posted on our what do you call them? New Year's resolutions. How do you,
Yes,
here's
intentions.
here's the question if we're playing the game of questions. How do Nick and Melissa do with their New Year's resolution to be better about time management?
Send your answers by email or postcard. We should mention as well, since we're anticipating a Scanner Darkly, quite a slender novel, we'll probably get through that quick. The one after that as well, we already have lined up, and that's going to be Inverted World by
Yes,
Christopher Priest.
yes.
And while you're buying Christopher Priest books, you could also get The Prestige, which was made into a very well-known film with Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. And that's also quite interesting. If you know the
Hmm.
film, then you probably know what that's all about. But yeah, Christopher Priest, Inverted World is coming up after. That's also quite a slim 200 page, roughly,
Hmm.
kind of novel. So that's what's coming up.
Yeah, and I know, they may I'm like I said, Philip K. Dick really like his work, but we just don't have the illusions and things that we have to follow up. C.S. Lewis sent us down endless, oh, I got to look up this. I got to check that out. So this will be, we promise no more marathons for a while.
For a while. I'm glad you said for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So thank you, everyone, and we will be back.